Hello, everyone. It is Friday, and we are here with the Master Gardeners. Today, we are talking about alternatives to lawn cares with Julie and Heather. And I should do the whole title, the Walworth County Extension Office Master Gardeners. So take it away, Julie.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. It is a gorgeous day outside, so I hope you are enjoying it. I hope you enjoy the weather this weekend and that your gardens and your yards are all looking good. Lots of things coming out of our vegetable gardens now, so it's really harvest time. So we are here every Friday to join you and help answer your questions. My name is Julie Hill. I'm the Horticulture Outreach Specialist for UW Extension for Walworth and Rock Counties. Heather Porter here is joining us. She is in the class to become a Master Gardener volunteer. So she is just about finished with her certification requirements. And then she will be certified for Walworth County and helping the community. Thank you, Michelle and Aram Library, for hosting us every week. This has been a great program to be a part of and offering some virtual help to all of our gardeners out there in this time where we don't have so many face-to-face interactions and our community events that we would normally be at. So this has been a good substitute. A little bit about me and as a staff member of University of Wisconsin, I am with the Division of Extension. And so our whole purpose is really to connect with all of you in the communities and answer those questions. Extension has a lot of different departments that we work in with community health and youth programming and 4-H and all sorts of stuff. So I work with horticulture and gardening issues and questions and education. So really, I just try to connect you with our resources, with information, and all of the information that we provide is university-based so that you know you are getting credible and reliable resources. Our Master Gardener Volunteer Program is a big part of us. It's how we can reach out to all of you in the community. Volunteers, like I said, complete annual certification requirements, and they fulfill those too by doing community service on various projects throughout the county. And they also have to continue learning through continuing education requirements. So we're lifelong learners as gardeners, right? Even if you're just starting off or you've been doing it for 40 years, there's always something new to experience and learn in the garden or doing yard work. Things change all the time. So it's fun to learn and to keep increasing our knowledge. So today for our top 5, we want to give you some alternatives to lawn. So a few weeks ago, we talked about some lawn. Maybe you're looking for ways to reduce the amount of lawn you really need a lawn. It's just to ask those questions about how your yard is being used. And in my personal example here, I live on 5 acres, but we don't have lawn throughout that whole 5 acres. We do have lawn around kind of the house and around our play areas for our child and, for the neighbor kids to run around on. It's good for, if you have some pet areas that you need lawn for, or obviously for sports activities. So our lawn gets used in those areas, but on the rest of the 5 acres, we're not mowing that down for turf grass. We let those areas go and have some trails going through there so that we can still walk the whole property and access things along those trails. So just consider, is the lawn getting used? Maybe you're at a time where you don't have kids at home and you don't need the lawn so much anymore. So a lot of times our lawns go largely unused. Lawns have kind of been a part of our culture for a long time, and that's okay, but there are just some alternatives and some other options that you can do for your residential yard that are going to maybe have the same amount of input, so the same amount of maintenance, the same amount of cost, or even less, and provide some extra benefits. So we'll give you some examples today too. So one alternative of having a big lawn is something I just mentioned about kind of creating some paths. So you could leave those paths as turf grass. You could use mulch as shown in this picture here on the right. You could use gravel, or there's a lot of other choices you could do. So maybe you just have a path to get to certain areas that you need to get to, some access paths. And then you could plant other things along those paths, whether you change them to gardens or other ground covers. There's a lot of ground cover options there that will grow nice and low, really low maintenance. You don't need to be fertilizing and mowing all the time. So there's just some other options that, that you can consider. Another possibility would be to consider something called a flowering bee lawn. And I'm going to share a resource in the comments at the end from the University of Minnesota. And they provide a lot of guidance on if you want to kind of transform your lawn into what's called a flowering bee lawn. Now, what is that? That just means it's a mixture of your turf grass like you normally would growing, but it also mixes in some other flowering plants. Clover is a really good example, but there's some other ground covers that you can use too. And there's a lot of benefits to this, especially kind of the benefits for pollinators. So having those flowering plants mixed in will really help the bees out, especially as they're looking around for food. And you have the beauty of the flowers themselves. And you'll have some increased lawn resilience with that mixture. Okay, so maybe some less pests and disease because you'll have a really strong, healthy lawn. And just also to mention, excuse me, that maybe you can leave those dandelions in your lawn. I know a lot of people think about them as weeds, but think about them as maybe food for the bees, especially in the early spring. That's one of the first things that the bees are going to go for, are those dandelions. And I know creeping Charlie is a nuisance, but those types of plants are really adapted to grow in difficult conditions. So maybe it's just changing our tolerance level a little bit, and letting those things grow, or not being so concerned that there's some dandelions in our lawn. I'm going to show you a graphic from the University of Minnesota, and this, I don't expect you to see all that small text. I'll go through it. I just wanted to show kind of the difference. So all the way on the left, where it shows on the top here, this picture of the short grass, that's our traditional lawn, our traditional turf grass. Okay, if you look all the way over on the right, that would be a garden, so a flower garden or a pollinator garden. A flowering bee lawn is just a step over from our traditional turf grass. So you can still walk on it. If you have areas that you're walking on a lot, a traditional lawn might be better. But if you have some other areas where they're not heavy foot traffic areas, you could maybe kind of put in this mix. Like I said, it does provide a lot of forage, a lot of food for pollinators. It's going to grow where you normally grow lawn. You will probably can mow it less frequently. You don't need to use herbicides on it because, again, we're trying to help out the bees. And then if you kind of move up this scale, letting the grass go and letting other things grow bigger, is you're getting into those meadows and the prairies. And if you're planting flowers into a garden, that's at that right-hand end of the scale. So really, we're just kind of a step above the traditional turf grass type of what we think of lawn by doing a flowering bee lawn. Again, just another option, just a suggestion if it works for your yard. Everybody's yard is different. If you have a real shady yard, this might not be the best choice, but just kind of rethinking things and thinking outside the box a little bit. Some other options might be you consider converting an area of the yard to a themed garden. So I'm going to show some examples that Heather provided, some really good examples. Think about maybe converting an area just to one specific theme and have fun with it. You're only limited by your imagination. So some examples would be you could just use ornamental grasses. So these aren't grasses that you're mowing to a certain height. You're not walking over that area, but they're still really beautiful. They're really low maintenance. There's a lot of native choices. You don't need to be fertilizing them. They have few disease and pest problems. So just kind of something to highlight. You can use something called ornamental grasses. This example here is something called prairie dropseed. And I'll provide some other examples in the comments too. Maybe you convert an area to some edible gardens. So that could be a lot of different ways too. The picture all the way on the left is showing an edible garden where you have, it looks like squash plants mixed in with flower plants. So again, just kind of rethinking our traditional ways of maybe it doesn't have to be just a flower garden or just a vegetable garden. Maybe you kind of mix and match. I know when I used to go to University of Wisconsin-Whitewater for a previous job, they would have things mixed in with their flower gardens too. So they would have maybe bok choy mixed in, and that's something that can grow, or rainbow chard or something just mixed in with the regular like flowering plants. So you have things interspersed. So it looks really cool too. The middle picture is just showing kind of a traditional vegetable garden. So maybe you convert an area to just a vegetable garden. So that area we're not mowing. That's just where we're going to grow food. Or raised beds is another option. Again, converting that small area of lawn, you're removing the lawn and you're putting in that raised bed to grow vegetables or other things there. So just some options, just some alternatives. Another example would be a pollinator garden. We mentioned that before, and that's specifically planting plants colors to attract your pollinators. And when you have pollinator gardens, you really want to try to have different species of plants in bloom throughout early spring all the way to late fall. So, and have different choices there. So I have lots of resources on pollinator gardens. I'll put my email in the comments box. There's a lot of resources online that I can help you with. So there's lots of suggestions for what plants to use and all those things. So this is a great choice and a great way to help our bees, butterflies, birds, and help out our pollinators and create some habitat. Another example would be a sensory garden. So a sensory garden is where you're planting plants that appeal to your senses, and that could be your sight or your smell. It could even be taste. So maybe it's more of a herb garden or touch. You could plant some lamb's ear, which is really soft and velvety, things like that. And you're not limited to just the plants. You could be using other pieces such as water features or hardscapes, maybe a bench, you know, something where you can create almost like a little retreat too. So this is just a picture of actually my son. I think he's probably 4 years old in that picture, and these giant sunflowers that we were growing next to our house. So again, use your imagination of transforming some, and it doesn't have to be a huge space. You could start off small and just plant something else instead of having to mow those areas all the time. And one more option would be if you have some water filtration that you want to help with, planting a rain garden. So rain gardens are excellent for helping filter the water that comes off of our houses before it hits either storm drains if you live in a more urban area, or filtering it before it goes into our lakes. So this really helps reduce the amount of runoff. It helps reduce the amount of pollutants going into those areas. So thinking about everything that we do in our yard is going to end up in water somewhere. We are all living in a watershed. No matter where we are, everything that we do in our land impacts our water quality nearby. So I know that rain gardens, you know, if your land is suitable, and again, great resources. I'm going to post this link that there's a manual for how to do a rain garden for homeowners and landscapers. It takes you step by step. I'm going to post that in the comment section after this. It's a great resource from the DNR about how to do a rain garden at your place. So there are some considerations that you need to make, and maybe it's not for everybody, but especially on how to manage water that is coming off of your house, and especially managing that runoff and trying to manage for pollutants. And one final kind of option here is, I mentioned that I have 5 acres, but we don't mow at all. So maybe you just let some of the land just kind of go back to nature. Maybe you leave it unmowed, or maybe you consider some trees and shrubs and planting some more of those in that area. Leaving it unmowed, you know, it's not totally maintenance free. You will have to think about any invasive species that might start creeping in and trying to remove those, and still taking care of the land. But maybe there's an area that you can just kind of let it be and let it get to that meadow or prairie phase, and be more naturalized. And this is, you know, in those areas that maybe aren't as utilized on your land. Again, if this is for a larger piece of land that you may have. Just some things to consider. I'm going to say here's a bonus tip. As with any new project, if you're thinking about converting an area, start small. Start with a plan, and you can always get bigger. Sometimes we really go too big and we've created this whole huge garden that we have high hopes for, and then the weeds take over, and then it just kind of fails after that. So really think about what you're doing, choose a good site, clear those weeds out, really take the time. And I know it takes more time at the beginning, but you'll have more success at the end. Really choose those appropriate plants for that site, and what you're trying to do. Are you trying to have a sensory garden and choosing plants for that? Or are you trying to grow more vegetables, or whatever it is? So really kind of paying attention and taking your time and starting small, it's going to help you in the long run. And remember, there are no gardening mistakes, only experiments. So I will post lots of resources in the comments as always. I'd also love to hear your feedback. So I'll post a link to a survey and I'll post my email. So you can always reach me with if you have more questions. If you have gardening questions that come up at your own home or when you're out working in the yard, just give me a buzz on email and I'd be happy to answer any gardening questions you have, whether it's a what's wrong with my plant type question or what is this growing? I can help with all of those types of things. Thanks, Michelle.
And thanks to both of you. I know earlier this week, I sent Julie some pictures of a mystery plant that my sister had at her house. And we were just fascinated because there were all these bees and butterflies all over it. And Julie was able to help us identify a salvia. So always take part. You guys can always jump in on our Facebook page and ask questions of the gardeners and send in pictures as well. They love a good stump the master gardener question. See if you can really dig into their informational brains. So thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you Heather and Julie for taking time out of your day for our Aram Public Library gardeners. And we'll see you next week. What will next week's topic be?
Next week, we are talking about gardening as we age. So really how to take care of our bodies while we're working out in the yard. There are some really good tips to remember to prevent injury and take care of yourself, especially as we're getting older.
Well, I look forward to that one because after a day of weeding, they're sore. So
Yeah,
thank you everyone and have a great weekend and we'll see you next week.
great. Thanks, Michelle. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the